Okay. So we're off and recording. Hi, Georgia. How are you today?
Yeah, I'm well, thanks. I'm excited. A lot of exciting things to talk about today.
Indeed. Yeah. So we're here to talk about the Backstage Music Shift program, which is happening this Sunday, the 4th of December at 4 p.m. Please check out the Backstage Music website for extra information about where to go and everything. And we've also put into the chat a link to the Backstage Music Shift Access page because that's what we're mainly going to be talking to everybody about today. So, Georgia, I wonder if you can start by explaining to everybody a little bit about the Shift program, what it's all about.
So Shift is all about celebrating artists with disability and what we can bring to the music industry and to the arts in general. And I think for a long time, artists with disability have kind of been put to the side, and there's been thought for a few years, about having people with disability in audiences and access in terms of that. But I think it seems to be quite recent that people are starting to think more about celebrating artists with disability on the stage and how we access the stage and how our voices can be amplified in that sort of way, and to kind of bring a different perspective to the music industry and to whose voices are being heard. So that was the plan with Shift. Lamorna is the brainchild behind this. I'll let you talk a little bit more about how you first came up with this idea. But I was so excited when you first approached me last year, almost a full year ago now, about putting this sort of thing on and exploring what we had to say.
Yeah, so we have indeed been talking about it for about a year. It seems incredible. So when we first started talking about it, I really didn't know very much at all about how we might make this happen. And to be honest, I was a bit scared about how to even talk about it, how to even broach the subject with you. So thank you for bearing with me while I got my head around all the terminology, and I'm sure made a few blunders along the way with how to talk about disability. But we started talking about a year ago because I thought it would be a wonderful thing, as you say, to try and start to bring people with a disability onto the stage, as you say. So we started looking at some potential artists to invite to be part of the program. And it took a little while to kind of get going with it, didn't it? Like, I suppose that's because not everybody is kind of comfortable identifying as disabled. Would you say?
Yeah, I think so. And I think, I feel like as well, I know that you had some chats with Morwenna Collett as well about these sort of ideas and people that she knew. And so I think I was also very new. Although I'm someone who has a disability, I was very new to this area. This is my first foray into anything like this. So just as you were saying, you felt kind of green about understanding all the terminology and things, I felt similarly. So although I have a disability, this is my first chance to kind of really think about these things from an access perspective that wasn't just from my own lived experience. I remember having some really interesting conversations with you just about how to broach this with different artists. And I know that you and Morwenna kind of came up with a fantastic list of people to potentially get in touch with. But I was very nervous in the same way about how to send out kind of these first connections with these people, and how to say it correctly and how not to kind of come across as offensive in any way, because you don't want to assume, and I think it's very important not to assume that someone would be comfortable identifying in a certain way. But yeah, it did feel like a very nerve-wracking experience, I suppose. But I think we're so lucky that the artists that we're working with were really so gracious in terms of understanding that, and understanding that this was a kind of first time for the people involved. And of course, Morwenna has a lot of experience, so it was great to be able to kind of check things with her. But yeah, I think people do sometimes have difficulty in terms of feeling comfortable identifying in a certain way. And it's all a learning experience for everyone, isn't it, in terms of how to start these conversations?
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose I'd kind of learned a little bit from my experience, both working with, at Ensemble Offspring. We've done a lot of work with female identifying composers, but obviously, being a woman is not like you just are a woman, I suppose. But and we'd also done some work kind of showcasing the work of First Nations composers, and part of that journey has been making a few mistakes along the way and learning a lot from their experience. So it feels a little bit like a similar kind of journey here. So we were very fortunate to get some grant support, some grant money to make this project happen. And we were also very lucky to be approached by the Sydney Opera House to put this program on. And we did a lot of work with the Opera House to make this happen. And in fact, they are going ahead and going to film all of the performances and release it on their digital platform, which is amazing. We were meant to be presenting the program at the Opera House, but there have been several staffing issues, I suppose is the easiest way of putting it, that's meant that we have had to go ahead at quite short notice and present it ourselves. So that has kind of raised a whole heap of issues for us about not only providing access for the artists, but also providing appropriate access for audiences. And Georgia and I have had a pretty hectic week or so trying to get our heads around all this stuff. And I thought it would be really nice to share with people a few of the things that we've learnt along the way, because I suppose the biggest thing that we've learnt is that a lot of spaces don't take anything into consideration, and that we didn't really know what we needed to do. So we've had to learn quite a few things along the way. Georgia, what's your feeling about where we should start with explaining what we've done?
I think, well, the first thing that was incredibly helpful for me was having the opportunity both to be able to have Morwenna as a sounding board, but to also have Janelle Ryan as a sounding board from the Sydney Opera House. She is amazing. She is the head of accessibility operations at the Opera House, and it was so wonderful to have the opportunity to learn from her when it was still being put on in the Opera House about what sort of things to ensure in terms of access, and not just physical access, but also in terms of access for people with different sensory needs, things like that. So that was incredibly helpful for us. And I think it was obviously there was a bit of a quick pivot in terms of moving from the kind of, in a way, safety of the Opera House space that we knew was going to be somewhere that was incredibly accessible because it had been built in terms of thinking about accessibility in the original kind of architecture, I suppose. It was going to be performed in the Centre for Creativity, which was purpose built to ensure access. So that was quite a safe space to know that it had all of that inbuilt. And just working with Janelle in terms of thinking about the other things to be mindful of actually was a really great kind of template to have, I suppose, were when we moved into the new venue. Obviously, it was a sudden shift, and we had to, no pun intended, had to suddenly think about how these things could maybe apply to a venue that was not purpose-built for access, and it's an older venue. So it's a converted church hall. And because it's an older venue, of course, when it was built, they weren't thinking with access in the forefront of their minds. So,
No.
but having that list, that kind of things that Janelle had very kindly flagged when we were working in the Opera House, kind of gave a really good starting point in terms of what would be important to have a look at in a new venue. So, things to kind of double check in terms of just physically accessible entrances for people who are wheelchair users, things like that. So ensuring that the venue had that, thinking about the possibility of people with sensory needs having somewhere that they could move to. So in terms of having doors open throughout the performance to allow people with different sensory needs to just be able to have a little break if the performance was getting overstimulating in any sort of way. Things like just outside the venue, ensuring that we had a visual story, so a way for people to be able to break down traveling to the venue into kind of steps, so it was clear to know what was happening next. There weren't kind of any unexpected surprises in terms of those sort of things. We already had the opportunity to work on some really important descriptions of our works. Each of the artists provided a description of their piece that kind of broke down the sound world. So people with different sensory needs would have the chance to kind of understand what was going to happen musically before the concert. So just thinking about all of these sort of different things that I'd kind of had a really vague think about from studying speech pathology, but hadn't really put into a concert context yet. So there are a few of the things that I thought were something maybe I hadn't really thought about and wouldn't have really thought about in terms of access before kind of learning from Morwenna and learning from Janelle about what sort of things that they thought about when putting on an accessible concert.
Yeah, absolutely. And like the interesting things that a couple of other things that I noticed was that, as you say, like the space that we're working in, the church, does have disabled access, like wheelchair access. There's a ramp, there's quite a large door, so that's all great. But the toilet, you can't get in there with a wheelchair. So we've had to kind of try and think our way around that, and we've done that by firstly letting people know that what is accessible and what isn't, but also suggesting a few alternatives that are in the area for anybody who might need it. And the other thing that we've had to start thinking a lot about is how we put together our website and how we do our newsletters and how we do our social media, so that people who are sight impaired can access the information that they need. And that's been a bit of a process to work out how to do that too, hasn't it? So there's things like making sure that the images have descriptions. I think they're embedded, the descriptions. You can make them embed. Although I don't think you can do that on Facebook, which is an interesting problem that Facebook should really be looking at.
Yes, I think it seems to be possible on Instagram, but not so much on Facebook. So unless, please do let us know, anyone who's watching this, if there's something that we've missed. And there's some way of doing this, but we could not find a way.
No. And we've also, like the website, you have been working out how to use a screen reader. Is that right?
I've been trying, having a very small beginning of a foray into exploring voiceover on my Mac, and just seeing what sort of things would be difficult in terms of navigating the website with a screen reader. And as you say, things like having the text, having the image descriptions is so important on something like that. And just in terms of things like the type of text that you're using, like using heading text for things that aren't headings, sometimes can be really confusing with a screen reader, because it kind of bunches things into little groups, as far as I'm aware. So it can kind of be misleading if things are kind of grouped together with a heading that isn't actually a heading, or things are put into a list that aren't actually part of the list. Or labeling was the other thing that I found really interesting, is things like links. So links to social media, having that very clearly saying like, this is the Facebook link, or this is the email link, and not coming up with, I think originally some of the social media links just came up with the name of the person that the social media was attached to, or the email address that it was attached to, and that was a bit confusing. So just kind of having links really clearly labeled with exactly where they were linked to was really something that I found interesting, and I wouldn't have thought about as someone that hasn't had to use a screen reader in my life before. So really interesting.
Yeah. And a couple of other things at the venue that we're going to try and work out how to do. Well, we are in the process of working out how to do. The main thing being live audio captioning. So that audio captioning is when someone in a space is writing down all the words that are going on in our situation on the live panel part of the event. So someone is going to be listening via a Zoom link to everybody speak. They need to be able to see the people and hear the people that are speaking. They will write it all down, and then we're going to project those words onto a big screen so that anybody who is hard of hearing can read the text as we are speaking it. And so that's going to be an interesting experience to work out how to manage all of that side of things. We're not exactly sure who's going to be in the audience, or whether they're going to need anything that we're providing like this, but it's been a great experience to start to grapple with some of the issues. And like, it's been fascinating for me to start thinking from other people's perspective, and imagine why it might be that people don't feel that they can attend things like this, because they don't feel like they're welcome, I suppose. And yeah, it's very humbling, I think, to start to explore those issues and realize how privileged that I am to be able to attend things without having to negotiate some of these obstacles. So
yeah, and I think it's been a really exciting and fruitful thing that Backstage can take into the future with every single concert. So I think that's the wonderful thing, is it seems that this has created something that can be used as a template for all concerts in the future, even if they're not kind of specifically catering for an audience that has different access needs, in terms of the audience that it's choosing to speak to, that the concerts in the future will have these kind of things just in the back of our minds in the future for anything, for the website, in terms of the newsletter, all of the things that you were saying, is hopefully a lot more access will be embedded into all of Backstage in the future, and maybe anyone who comes to watch the concert or even watches this green room might hopefully get a couple of tips from the things that we've learnt, and maybe the mistakes that we've made to think in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And feel free, if anybody's interested, to reach out to us and ask questions. Or if you want to come to the concert and you're a bit concerned that you might not be able to because of your own access needs, then also please feel free to get in touch with us via the backstagemusic.com.au website. and we'll really do our best to, well, at least let you know what we can do. So yeah. And I think that basically covers it for today. Georgia, you're going to go away and listen to the little recording that I made of your piece.
I'm so excited. Really
That's a nice little kind of part of the project as well, being working with you directly in a kind of composer performer way. So I'm excited about that too. It's been really interesting to work on your piece, and to explore all of the concerns that you have to be delivering your music in this slightly different context. So yeah,
I'm really excited, and I mean, I'm so lucky to be able to work with such a fantastic performer, so thank you.
Oh, thank you, Georgia. So yeah, once again, Shift is happening this Sunday at the church in Alexandria. Georgia, can you remember the address?
I want to say it's 9 Mitchell Road, but I don't quote me on the number.
Mitchell Road, definitely.
Yeah.
And it's at 4 p.m. So there'll be about an hour's worth of music, and then it'll be followed by about an hour-long panel discussion that's being led by Morwenna Colette. Morwenna's name is not coming up correctly on the captioning that's happening below, but she is amazing. So come along and you'll get to meet her, the real Morwenna. Not more winner. Anyway, thank you, everybody, and hopefully we'll see you on Sunday. Thanks, Georgia, and chat soon.